So if you clicked on this video, you already know the very exciting news, and that's that Ryan and I are getting married. We have our wedding planned for October 10th, 2024, which is actually 2 weeks from today. And it's also our 8-year anniversary. For the wedding, Ryan and I are planning a very small, very intimate elopement in New York City, and then we're hopping on a plane for a honeymoon adventure. So this video is all about my wedding projects, and that's gonna involve dyeing, carding, spinning, weaving, crafting, and more. I'm also gonna tell you about how Ryan proposed to me and maybe take you along on some of our actual wedding day adventures. So this video is gonna be absolutely filled with crafting and handmaking, and it's also gonna be cheesy and romantic and savvy and all the wonderful things that weddings are. So let's talk about the projects I want to make, because there are 2 big things on my list. The first one is that I want to hand make my bouquet out of felted flowers, which I thought would be really cute as a part of our ceremony. And with that, I'm also going to make a little boutonniere so Ryan can match. And the second thing is that I want to hand weave a scarf that's inspired by my wedding dress, because I thought it would be fun to have something to wear during our autumn honeymooning to kind of like keep the festive vibes in my outfits. And I want to try to make all of this from scratch, like as much as possible. So we're gonna first start with some dyeing. I know that weddings are obviously supposed to be like all white and pristine, but this is my wedding, so of course there's gonna be some color. My color palette for this project is essentially just the colors of my wedding dress. My dress is bright white with 7 accent colors. So I got 1 little pot of Jacquard's acid dye powders in each color. The first thing I'm dyeing for this project is some mulberry silk noil. Silk noil is essentially all of the waste fibers that are removed during the process of silk fiber preparation. These fibers are short and very textured, and they add a lot of really fun character to carded bats. So I first weighed out 1/2 ounce amounts of silk noil in a glass mason jar. I prepared 1 jar for each color, and then I poured in some tap water just to pre-soak the silk. Then I put on my safety gear and I started preparing my dyes. I started with 1 cup of hot tap water in my mixing cup, and then I added around a teaspoon of acid dye into each cup. The last time I prepared acid dyes, I was making concentrated stock solutions, so 1 teaspoon was perfect. I totally forgot that for this project I wasn't making stocks and was only dyeing a little bit of silk, so 1 teaspoon is way too much dye. And I didn't realize this mistake until much later on. So yeah, ignoring that for now. I dissolved the dye powder in my hot tap water and tested the color using some strips of paper, just to see if I liked how it was turning out. And then I poured the dye over my soaked silk noil. I repeated this process for all of my dye colors. I then put these jars in my big flat dye pot and I heated them up water bath style. After about 15 minutes of heating, I mixed up a solution of 1/2 tablespoon of citric acid dissolved in 4 cups of hot water. And then I divided this evenly between all 7 jars. I gave each jar a good mix, and then I left them on the heat for another 45 minutes. Once the time was up, I let them cool, I rinsed them with dish soap, and then I left them out to dry. And here's how my beautiful silks turned out. They are super bright and colorful, which is exactly what I had wanted. Next, it was time to turn these silks into a yarn. For the base of my yarn, I'm using a merino and silk blended roving, the exact same one that I used for my textile thesis collection. It is super soft, super shiny, and it spins up really nicely. Then I created my bat using a drum carder. I first laid down some of the silk fiber by painting it onto the drum. And then I added my hand-dyed silk noil. To do this, I'm just brushing little clumps of the silk directly onto the drum. And then I'm packing it in using my doffer brush before fully cranking the drum carder's handle. I found that this is the easiest way to get the silk noil onto the large drum and to not have it sucked up by the little drum, which is designed to pick up smaller imperfect fibers. In this case, we want those small fibers to stick around, and this method seems to work out pretty well for me. So I brushed on a little bit of each one of my colors, and then sandwiched all of this colorful silk in between another layer of my white roving. And I repeated this process over and over again until my drum was too full to hold anymore. I find the drum carding process so fun and so satisfying. It really feels like I'm just playing, and there's something so mesmerizing about watching all the fibers blend together. And here's how everything turned out once the carder was totally filled up. I really packed a lot in there, and with all the brushing in between each layer, it was kind of challenging to take it off the carder. But here's how my bat turned out after one pass on the carder. I really love how this turned out, but I wanted things to be super duper blended together, so I decided to card each bat one more time. This was a really quick and easy process. I pretty much just had to paint the bat back onto the large drum. Then I wanted to try something that was totally new to me. I wanted to use a diz, which is a little wooden circle with a hole in it, to help me remove the fiber from the drum carder. And this would create roving, which is just so nice to spin. So basically, I just pulled the fiber in through this hole, and then I used the wooden piece to gently pull the fiber off of the drum into nice long strips. I'd never tried this before, and honestly, I struggled a little bit just because the silk chunks kept getting stuck in the diz. But after fussing with it for a while, I eventually got it to work. And here's how all of my roving turned out. It's shiny and chunky and colorful. It looks like a super joyful confetti cake, which is basically exactly what I had wanted. And now it's ready to be spun up into a yarn. Hello! So it's been a minute since I've actually had the chance to talk to you directly, and I kind of wanted to explain why. So you know that superstition that like the groom isn't supposed to see the bride's dress before the wedding date or else it brings bad luck? So this project is directly inspired by my wedding dress in a lot of ways. Like it directly pulls from the color palette and the motifs and the general aesthetic of it. So Ryan and I were saying like, okay, wait, so if he sees this, is that also bad luck? So to be totally safe, I've also been keeping all of these projects completely secret from Ryan. Ryan and I aren't like actually superstitious, like we're not worried about bad luck, but I think there is an element to the whole like keeping surprises until the wedding day that is really fun. So that's more like the nature of keeping the secrets. That does make filming a little bit challenging just because when I need the kitchen and I need the stove top, I can't talk to you guys because he can hear it when he's in the house and that'll blow the secret. But today he actually had to go in the office to work, which works really well because I was hoping to spin all of this yarn and now I can tell you guys about it. So my goal is to take all the fluffs that we spent all day yesterday carding and turn it into yarn. I'm gonna use my trusty Luette S10C wheel, which I absolutely adore. I'm just gonna make this into like a funky and chunky single ply yarn. You guys know by now that I'm not a very technical spinner. Like I'm not striving to make perfect yarn with like perfect spin and super consistent thicknesses. I'm actually striving to do the exact opposite because I love the look of like unmistakably hand spun yarn in a weave. I just think it has so much charm and so much character. And I think especially this fiber is gonna lend itself really well to that because it's so chunky and irregular already, just with all this like silk dumped into it. I think the yarn that's gonna come from this is gonna be really fun, and I just wanna embrace the texture and the lumpiness and the bumpiness and the colors, and I just wanna have fun. So yeah, let's get to it. And of course, my lovely assistant Frankie came to help me out with this process. But she was just a little bit upset that I was giving the wheel more attention than I was giving to her. All she wants. After I spun up all of my beautiful confetti fiber into a funky, chunky, thick and thin yarn, I soaked it in some hot water and wool wash for about 15 minutes, spun it up in my spin dryer, and then hung it up to dry. And here's how the yarn turned out. You might notice that the base of this yarn is not really a nice pure white anymore, and that's totally my fault. It's pretty much a result of having way too much dye in my silk noil, which I struggled to fully wash out. So now my yarn is a little bit more of like a purplish pinkish color. At first I was really bummed about this, but it actually ended up working out so well. Okay, so now I have the weft figured out. It's time to figure out what the warp is gonna be for my project. My thought was that because there's so much going on in this yarn, like it's chunky, it's irregular, there's lots of color and lots of things sticking out of it, I thought it might be best to keep the warp fairly simple. Also, because this is like a wedding project, I thought having a white warp just kind of made sense, you know? So I'm gonna use a yarn that you might actually recognize. If you were tagging along for my whole thesis adventure last semester, this is the yarn that I used for my warp for my entire thesis collection. It's a really beautiful lace weight wool silk yarn that I got from the Woolery, and it's so soft, and the fabric that it makes is just so drapey and delicate, even with these like super chunky yarns woven in. So I think these two are gonna pair really nicely together for this project. When I make my scarves, I really like them to be pretty long and pretty wide, just because to me, it's really fun to have a lot of fabric to like wrap yourself in. Not only because it's warm and cozy, but also just because like so much effort is going into this fabric. Like I really want it to be the star of my outfit, you know? So my scarf is gonna be pretty wide, and I'm also gonna make the warp really long, like extra long, just so I have some room for sampling. So yeah, we're gonna use my warping board that's here against the wall, and let's get started on this warp. I made my warp and I put it on the loom. This is my Ashford 16 harness table loom, and I am now gonna start the threading process. I don't actually plan on using all 16 harnesses from this loom. I only need 4 for this project. So I'm probably just gonna like focus on the middle 4 just to make my life a little bit easier. And I'm gonna be threading this with a super simple straight draw. So that's just 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, over and over and over again. Should be pretty easy. Let's do it. The next step was to take my absolutely gigantic skein of hand-dyed, carded, and hand-spun yarn and wind it into balls that I can actually use. And to do this, I used my Swift and my ball winder. While I'm winding this yarn, I just wanted to take a moment to give a huge shout out to my amazing patrons. Thank you so much for supporting my channel. Your support means the world to me. For just $5 a month, you too can join our growing community and get exclusive access to my lab notes, which are the super detailed notes, scans, and photos that I take throughout my projects. I put everything together in a beautiful document so you can dive even deeper into my creative process. And of course, there's gonna be some lab notes for this project as well. If that sounds interesting, definitely check out the link in this video's description to learn more, and I'd love to have you in our Patreon community. Okay, now back to the project. Now that my loom is threaded and my weft is ready, it's time to plan my actual weaving. When I was at Convergence in 2024, I had the amazing opportunity to take Deborah Silver's split shed weaving workshop, and I totally fell in love with that technique. And I thought that for this wedding scarf project, it would be an absolutely perfect way to incorporate some large, bold motifs into my weaving. So I consulted my copy of Deborah's book, my samples from the class, and all of my notes, and I decided on a structure that I would use for my project. This one creates one side of the fabric that's really warp-faced and another that's really weft-faced, using some really pretty weave structures, which is perfect for what I have in mind. So the next step was to create my cartoon, which is essentially the sketch that I'll be using to guide my weaving. To do this, I started with a piece of scrap muslin fabric that is the width of my warp, and I needed to add something to the end of the fabric to serve as a weight. So I got one of my extra shuttles and I secured it to one end of the muslin fabric. I totally could have made a little channel and sewed this fabric down and made it look all perfect and beautiful, but I just couldn't be bothered. So I just folded over the fabric and safety pinned it to hold the shuttle in place. I then drew a vertical line down the center of the fabric. Then it was time to create my motif. I wanted to make a simple, big, and bold heart. So I sketched it out. And then I transferred this to my muslin fabric using the center line as a guide. Voila! My cartoon is done! And now it's time to start weaving. Okay, hi! So I have a heart and I'm really excited about it. I didn't end up filming any of this process just because I kind of needed to get back into the groove of the technique and remind myself how to do it before I turned the camera on and tried to explain it to you guys. So now that I kind of got back into it, let me tell you all about it. Okay, so before we get into this, I just want to quickly mention that because I learned this technique from Deborah Silver's workshop, it's not my technique to share in full detail here on YouTube. So I'm only going to give you the basics of the technique and basically only what's already available online. If you want to learn more, definitely check out Deborah Silver's book called The Technique of Split Shed Weaving, and also her amazing workshops. Thank you so much for understanding. Okay, so after attaching my heart-shaped drawing to the loom using an extra long shuttle that I tied to my beater, I started the weaving process. The goal is to split the weaving shed in half, and to do so, I popped an extra long shuttle behind my beater. And then I lowered some of my harnesses. This created two separate sheds, where the top one is weaving one pattern and the bottom one is weaving another. Now I can take my weft yarn and stick it in the bottom shed, and wherever I want my heart-shaped motif to appear in the woven cloth, I just bring the weft up to the topmost shed by hand. And then I return it to the bottommost shed to continue the background. And to create this specific design, I alternated my weft, so I had one pick with the split shed technique using my hand-spun yarn, and one pick of plain weave using the same yarn that I have in my warp. Hopefully that explanation of this process makes sense. It's definitely very fiddly and time-consuming, but somehow I find it really fun, and it's just so satisfying to watch the motif slowly appear over time. For my scarf design, I started by making 3 hearts on a white background as the face of my fabric. And then when I flip it to the back side, the design is perfectly inverted. At the exact halfway point of my scarf, I decided to switch up the ground and the motif. So now I'll have white hearts on my colorful tweedy background. I also flipped the heart motif upside down so that it's facing the right way when wearing the scarf, and I wove 3 of these white upside down hearts in total. Since this is my dedicated wedding video, I thought it would also be fun to share how Ryan proposed to me. Our anniversary tradition is that the two of us always go bowling together since it's what we did on our first date. So Ryan proposed to me with a custom bowling ball that he designed himself. And this beautiful ball features a photograph from each of our 7 bowling anniversary celebrations together. He even planned a trip to the local bowling alley to get the holes custom measured and drilled into the ball, which was such a fun experience. And then of course we played a game with my beautiful new ball. I truly could not have dreamed of a more beautiful and heartfelt proposal. Oh, and of course I said yes. Okay, back to the wedding project. After many full days of weaving, I was finally done with my scarf and was ready to cut it off the loom. I don't know why I grabbed the dullest scissors ever to do this part. It definitely didn't make for a satisfying warp cut. Once the scarf was off the loom, I trimmed the fringe so all the yarns would be even in length, and to do this, I used my rotary cutter just to make life a little bit easier. Then I tied up all of my fringe, and then I twisted them up, and you'll have to wait for the reveal to see how this whole scarf turned out. The next item on my wedding to make list was my felted flower bouquet. To start this project, I got some felt sheets. These are really similar to the ones that you'd find at a normal craft store, except these sheets are 100% wool. So they'll take my acid dyes really well and I can get a super close color match. So first, I dyed some of these wool sheets in each of the 7 colors of my wedding dress. I repeated this whole process again with some wool felt balls. In theory, I could have dyed these sheets, balls, and my silk noil at the same time just to get an exact color match and to save myself the effort, but I had planned the scarf before I had fully planned this bouquet, so it just kind of ended up working out like this. And here's how all of my dyed materials turned out. Given how none of this was planned efficiently, I'm happy enough with the color matching. It really doesn't need to be exactly perfect. I then brought these wool materials, some hot glue guns, floral tape, and wire to my sister's house, where my mom and dad joined in and we created the felt flowers for my wedding bouquet together.
It's so cute! Oh my god!
I had looked up some really simple flower tutorials as inspiration and picked a few simple flower shapes to include in the bouquet. And then we sat around my sister's coffee table and we crafted together. And it was such a wonderful experience. There's something so fun and magical about crafting with company, and working together as a family on my wedding bouquet was, of course, even more magical. Everyone actually got really into the process, which genuinely surprised me, and each person added their own unique touches to every single flower, which of course made the bouquet extra special. So let me show you the flowers that we made. These little buds were made with the wool balls and some pieces of cut felt, and I just think they're so dang cute. I thought the bouquet could also use some white flowers to make it more wedding-y, so I made a bunch of these cute little guys with a pop of color in them. My sister made a bunch of leaves to fill out the bouquet and to make it look even more real, and she also made these little baby's breath as filler flowers. I made these lavenders as an extra pop of purple, and my mom helped out with all of the different kinds of flowers, and she also made these cute little guys. And of course, my dad just kind of did his own thing and made a bunch of crazy statement flowers that I just adore. Of course, all of these beautiful flowers ended up in my bouquet, which I packed for our big day. And then it was finally time for the wedding. Ryan and I eloped on October 10th, 2024, our 8-year anniversary, at the TWA Hotel at JFK Airport in New York City. After our beautiful little wedding, my husband and I hopped on a plane to Paris for a week of honeymoon adventures, which was especially convenient since we were already at the airport. We had a beautiful time exploring the city, and we even did a little newlywed photo shoot in front of the Eiffel Tower, where of course, I wore my wedding dress inspired, hand-dyed, hand-carded, and hand-woven scarf. And here's a closer look at the scarf back home in New Jersey so you can see all of the details. thank you so much for joining me on this wonderful adventure. This was, of course, my most special project ever, and I was so excited to share this experience with you. Oh, and I also want to give a huge shout out to the amazing photographers who made all of these super fun photos and videos happen for us. If you'd like to see some more of my projects, even though I'm not really sure anything can top this, feel free to hit that subscribe button, and hopefully I'll see you in my next video. Bye!